Thank you. Thank you all for being here. I'm very happy to be back in Nebraska. I was here about 16 years ago in another exhibition. I think it was called Transnational. And I gave a lecture then. So I'm very, very happy to be back again and enjoy the very nice exhibition upstairs that I feel, very flattered to be part of. Anyway, so let me see, I'm gonna start. This is not the first slide. I have too many images, so I'm not gonna talk about everything because I will spend here the whole night. So, so I'm gonna start with a little bit of background. I grew up in Mexico City. My mom, pretty much from working class parents. Middle class, but my mom was a seamstress for many years. She didn't want to depend much of my dad's income either. She wanted some independence from my dad, and she had a great sense of justice herself. Even though she was not very political or study any political theory or was leftist or right, but she knew what was right or wrong. There was a time when she came back crying at home. I was 15 years old. This is 1968. And this is when there was a student uprising in Mexico City, right before the Olympic Games. And she saw a police killing an 11-year-old kid. And she was so upset, she was crying. And I started crying with her at the same time. That created a big impression on me because then I wanted to understand what's going on in the world with society, with violence. I still don't understand it. I want to, but it's really hard, even these days, especially these days. But anyways, in few words, my mom was an influence in me in terms of my sensibility, what was, I was interested in understanding in the world. This is another picture of her. My dad painted over, so he put too much red on the leaves, so it's pretty overdone. My dad was maybe, I was telling some friends here, the wrong role model for me. He was an artist who didn't make a living as an artist, but he ended up working for the central bank in Mexico City. The central bank was the mint, so they printed the money. And the job of my dad was to catch criminals who were doing forgeries or were doing fraud, and he was involved in many arrests. And sometimes he befriended some of these con artists in jail. He used to bring them art supplies, things like that, and then they would tell him why they did what they did. Apparently that works better than waterboarding, being friendly, Anyway, so here's this picture of him. He almost became a wrestler. So it looks like Superman almost here, but it was a scary dad to have because, he had a short temper and you didn't want to make him too upset. But besides, he influencing me with in his office just by taking me there when I was 10 years old. And he left a big impression. He had a big skull of a criminal on his desk, things like that. Also, I guess he got fed up with me when I keep asking him to teach, to make drawings for me. I keep asking him to draw animals, shapes, things. And he rather decided to do it myself because he didn't want to do it. And so that was the best thing he did for me. I was 7 years old, more or less, when he taught me my first sketching lessons, how to draw, color theory, and I haven't stopped since then. Anyway, so I'm gonna move on. I could tell you more about my family, but that's a novel. That's a different thing. So, so I have done many series of works, and perhaps the influence of being with my dad at my dad's office made me want to do many lookalikes. When I studied history of printmaking at the San Francisco Art Institute, I was lucky to run into original prints by Spanish artist Francisco Goya, from the disasters of war especially. And I decided to make my own versions of them. And again, this is back 1983 when Ronald Reagan invaded Central America. And he declared himself a Contra. The Contras were these guerrilla groups who were fighting the Sandinistas. And there was a commission organized by Henry Kissinger that went to Nicaragua, and they declared that Nicaragua was a puppet of the Soviet Union, which was nonsense. I mean, Nicaragua was a coalition of Christian groups, some Marxists too, but it was more like a very open. They fought against a dictatorship that was there for about over 30 years, the Somoza family. And I was there, I went to Nicaragua, and people were very excited at the time. This is 1981 when I went there. So when Ronald Reagan decided that they were communist, and decided to finance the Contras, even against Congress, I decided to make a drawing of him. And I found this print by Goya, and I didn't change the title. Contra has the word contra in it. So contra el bien general is against the common good, the translation. So, and I did the first look-alike thing I ever did as an artist. I was still in my last year of undergrad school at the San Francisco Art Institute when I made this print. And it left a mark. Eventually I did an edition of this, but not until 2003, I think. So it was about 20 years later. So other prints that influenced my work, this design of a gas mask. I don't know if that was ever mass produced, but you know, if you go online and look for the Walt Disney gas mask. So I decided to put it in my version of that etching. This is how it looks in the print from 2003. I did a self-portrait again with Goya's shoe. It was too big for me, and Goya's hat. And it's pretty much a disclaimer because I didn't want to compete with Goya. It's too intimidating. So I just wanted to do something like forgeries without getting caught. This is Goya getting to know Posada, another of my favorite printmakers from Mexico, and they've been introduced by death. And that was the rich lady or Katrina that Posada created. It's very popular on Day of the Dead, actually. So more prints. And this was one of my early appropriations of European art. I make two kinds of appropriations. One is like a tribute to Goya. In this case, this is an homage to Goya. This is not reverse modernism or reverse anything. It's a plain, straight admiration for an artist like Goya. And maybe I got cursed for that because now I have a ringing in my ear. Goya was kind of deaf, you know. I'm sorry I did it. And so I have ear damage now, but I learned to live with it. In any case, and Picasso, a lot of the artists I appropriate are artists that I love. Even though you see a Picasso being attacked violently in the painting here, I love Picasso actually, and he left a mark on me. But anyway, so I'm gonna move really fast on this because you know, I really don't have a lot of time. This is another series of Goya's prints that I use from the Caprichos. This is my earlier series, Hunting Teeth. And this is based on the idea that if you get a tooth coming out of a hanged person, it'll bring you very good luck. And of course, Goya was critiquing the superstitions that were going around in Spain in the late 1700s, early 1800s. And these were the times when the Holy Inquisition was, you know, very, very strong. And Goya had to be very, very careful with his etchings because he could have been executed by the Holy Inquisition on the grounds that he was portraying superstition and that he might believe in it or criticizing religion or whatever. But he got saved by the king, by Charles IV. Charles IV say that he commissioned these etchings and so saved his king. Anyway, what was weird to me was not that somebody believed that you have good luck from the tooth of a hanged person, but the fact that you will go out at night and find hanging people from I mean, that's the scary part. So I did it with a stereotype of a Mexican, like a monster here, like a red fink with Snow White, head of the KKK. And anyway, so this is Fidel Castro dying. I made this in 1989, and Fidel has been dying since 1990. Poor guy. He's endless dead. Self-portrait. I was much younger then. So I noticed that this print is in the exhibition upstairs, and that's another one of my favorite prints from all times. The Sleep of Reason Produces Monsters. This is supposedly Goya himself, a self-portrait of him. And the thing is, with all these bats and owls and cats as symbols of evil, I felt that, this print was dated. Because all these animals are endangered species today, most of them, not all the cats. But the bats are in danger. I mean, there's all this fungus killing the bats, and the bats are really good for agriculture. Actually, scientists are very worried about it. Owls, there's a lot of owls that are endangered species. And cats, of course, like some big cats are endangered, like the tiger in some places, and some leopards. Not house cats. House cats are thriving. I have 2 of them, and you will see one of them in my lecture. But I decided that really scary things were more like, military aircraft and a war, basically. I decided to still leave an owl there, more like a pet, like a nice companion, another owl in the back. But on the lower right corner, you could see like a nuclear waste pollution and, things that are getting out of control in our society on and off. Anyway, Jesse Helms and Jerry Falwell giving themselves a pedicure. Jerry Falwell complained that one of the Teletubbies was gay, Inky Winky, the purple one, and so they gave him a pedicure to Inky Winky too, but it went too far. They cut his legs. I'm sorry about that. But anyway, Linda Tripp and Monica Lewinsky. Sorry. But I found the word Linda in this. I didn't change the original words in Goya's etchings. The previous Pope, the German guy, what's his name? I forgot.
Benedict.
What is it?
Benedict?
Benedict, yeah, Pope Benedict, thank you. Because all this pedophilia scandal happened, and he didn't do anything. And I have some Italian friends of mine who are sure that he quit because his brother was involved with the pedophilia and didn't want to interview. But I think that's not proven. But that's what some Italian people think. In any case, I did one of those prints by Goya in that regard. And this you probably recognize President Obama. I put a little KKK character on the bottom because there is a really serious backlash, a racist backlash against Obama just for being black. And I don't necessarily agree with everything that he has done. He didn't fulfill a lot of promises. There's, like any politician, a lot of promises that are never completed or done. But still, I think he was very much surrounded by all these difficult powers that very much neutralize a lot of the things he wanted to do. So the translation is, "You will not escape," on the Spanish caption on the bottom. And this is a more recent print from ULIE. Again, the hat is too big for me. And it's another disclaimer. Anyway, so I'm gonna move really fast through these things. This is my second version of the Sleep of Reason. All these are from between 2012 and 2015. This is Rupert Murdoch, the owner of Fox News. He lost a contract because he spied through the cell phones on a lot of famous people in England, and he lost the contract of a satellite. The art market here with some paintings by Damien Hirst. Vladimir Putin and Stalin, because they are so homophobic. And unfortunately, you don't see the rubber stamp in this image. In the rubber stamp, I put a guitar, electric guitar, with the word Pussy Riot. Sorry I didn't have the slide to put that in. And anyways, more about the pedophilia. I mean, I'm very sensitive about the pedophilia issues because I have known friends. I have a very close known person. I don't want to say names, but her father, very much molested her when she was little, and it left a mark on me. So I've been sensitive about these issues of pedophilia and the fact that the Vatican hasn't done much. Even the new Pope, that seems to be more worry about the issue, hasn't done much beyond nice speeches. So, but I hope something will be done. I'll talk more about it later. All these stereotypes rebelling themselves against these KKK chickens. The militarization of police, and so on. Another one of the art market with a sculpture by Jeff Koons. Bravissimo. Anyway, so I'm just going to move very quickly. I'm not going to talk about every specific print. A lot of the images are pretty much self-explanatory. This is the George Bush administration, loyalty. And this is the, intelligence agencies spying through our iPhones. They're probably recording my lecture right now from my iPhone. Anyway, so these are monotypes. This is one of a kind. These are really big, like about 3 by 4 feet. Their versions. So this is another print. I made this one right after President Obama won the elections in 2008. So this is from 2009, and it's the inauguration car. And somehow I had the intuition that things were not going to move very fast. So I made this carnival carriage, but with no wheels. So it doesn't seem like he's going to many places. Hillary Clinton is on top of the globe, and Joe Biden on the right, and Michelle Obama on the left. This is another one. This is after George. By the way, the original artist from this is a French artist, Jacques Callot. And this is a British satirist from the 1700s, George Cruikshank. And so I made my version of it, the headache. I made this for the Rosenbach Library in Philadelphia for the print festival Philagraphica. The another kind of forgeries. This is the influence of my dad. So we made this electronic dollar that gives you instant public debt. So I made this when the public debt was $11 trillion. I think right now it's $18 trillion, so $7 trillion ago. And the share per household in this case was 80. I think now it's about $90,000 we all owe. We changed all the writing, like this is a federal bailout note, the United States of America, and one recession instead of $1. So they printed a whole sheet of them too, just to make real money. It feels really good when you make money and you can get away with it. And a close-up, but this is a double print. This is the role of undocumented immigration on the dollar. And this is a little Mexican that is embedded in the George Washington. This is my version of $1 billion. We just made this one. This is the unequal states of America. And this is about just how income has been developing a huge gap between the haves and the have-nots. This is the back. In text loopholes, we trust. I'm just going to show you very few of my charcoal drawings. I did, these are really big, like 7 feet by 7 feet. I made this after I finished my school at the San Francisco Art Institute for an exhibition of artists called against intervention in Central America, organized by art critic from New York, Lucy Lippard. And it left a mark on me too. And I didn't want to make art when I made these drawings. I felt this is editorial cartooning. It was not art. And, you know, because before, I mean, in Mexico I was doing abstract painting. I believe in constructivism and things like that. Somehow something changed when I moved here and the cartoonist in me came out. Somebody destroyed that work. It's hard to see here, but it was torn. So I decided to make a forgery of my own drawings. I made a second version of it. And this one, it's owned by the Stanford Museum from the Cantor Art Center. This happened during the Iran-Contra hearings, and where Ronald Reagan declared that he didn't remember a lot of the dealings he had with selling arms to the Iranians. This is in the collection of SF MoMA. Anyway, so I made a drawing based on this painting. This is an outrageous imagery that you could find in the book by Leo Steinberg, The Sexuality of Christ in Renaissance Art and Modern Oblivion. And it's Jesus having an erection. It's a little hard to see here because kind of, you know, the image is not very big, but kissing his mom. And there's a whole chapter that Leon Steinberg wrote about this piece, basically claiming that what he's showing is that Jesus was a human being, just flesh and bones. And also the idea of a baby with an erection is an idea of a king. So I made my own version, and it's a whole series of art in the Renaissance where that's the focus. So I made a collage for that, for this book, Not Good for Funding. And this is when Jesse Helms attacked the National Endowment for the Arts because artists were using religious imagery. But, you know, it's I mean, I don't know if any artist will paint like that today, but it's a very profound imagery. And, you know, unfortunately, a lot of that is lost with so much, you know, political warfare. Anyway, so I just want to show this one because this is influenced by Philip Gaston. And you have a painting upstairs where Philip Gaston's have shoes coming out of like a pit. And this is called Thesis, Antithesis. I'm going to move on to my lecture now because otherwise I'll be here forever. So I might talk a little bit about my codices. Maybe a little bit about my reverse anthropology. I started thinking about reverse anthropology when I learned about the destruction of the pre-Columbian books during the conquest of Mexico back in 1521. The biggest library in the continent, the Library of Texcoco, was burned. All the books that were in there were burned. The library was built at the peak of the Aztec Empire in the late 1400s by an Aztec king who was a poet and who was against human sacrifice, the king Netzahualcoyotl, Netza for short, or the feather coyote, that was the translation. King Netza didn't believe in human sacrifices, and he never committed one. And he revised that idea for the kingdom. He built up a pyramid to the never seen God because for him nobody has ever seen God. And he created a pyramid, and on the top there was just an empty room. So just a very advanced thinker. He was a poet, as I say, and he organized poetry festivals. He was an architect. He built up a beautiful building for the library and built up the biggest library of the continent. When he died in, just about a year before the arrival of Columbus to the Americas. So he was very lucky. He didn't see his kingdom destroyed just about 3 decades later. So in 1521, all the books were piled up outside the library and burned in a pile. And there was a mass suicide. The indigenous people who saw the burning of the books, they committed suicide. When I learned that story, I decided to make my own versions of those books, because from that perspective, history, especially in books, is written by those who are the victors of war. So, and from that perspective, history is not a science, but more like an ideological construction. So I decided to make, rather than an ideological construction, an artistic construction of the books. There are only 3 Mayan books that survive the fire of the conquest. All the Mayan books had the same fate as the Aztec books. One single priest, Father Diego de Landa, burned all the Mayan books in Central America and the Yucatan Peninsula. And one of the books is in Paris, the Codex Paris, one is in Spain, in Madrid, and one in Dresden. Anyway, so I'll talk about my books a little more later, but this is an anonymous drawing of an indigenous artist portraying the execution of indigenous people who didn't want to turn into Christianity. So when I began to do my vision of history, I began to start to think of the dichotomy between barbarism and civilization, which is something that the Greeks invented. For the Greeks, everything outside Greece was barbarian. And then that concept was translated over Europe when Europe had colonies all over the world. Then the colonies were the barbarians and the Europeans were the civilization. So, a lot of stereotypes came out of it. And a lot of things in the conflicts between the West and the East are things unresolved from that history, in my opinion. In any case, here I did like a pre-Columbian miniature with a skull rack, and on the right, Coca-Cola rack with miniatures too. It's kind of like a yin and yang in my work. And that created the idea of doing works like this one. Here we see Columbus soldiers carrying the hands of the Taino Indians, and I made this painting based on hands, all kinds of hands from different cultures. And this is when I began to think of reverse anthropology, pretty much. What would be like if Europe had been conquered by the Aztecs? They might have built pyramids where they used to have churches, maybe. And I thought the history might not be too different, because the Aztecs were actually very violent too. They were ruling all the indigenous cultures around the Aztec kingdom. And when the conquest took place, the other indigenous people joined the Spaniards against the Aztecs. So at the end, humanity is pretty much the same. We're the same species. And that's maybe my point when I began to do the reverse anthropology series. I decided to really play with the stereotype of the savage, the primitive, the uncivilized, the barbarian. And I did it with Pete Wilson. Pete Wilson was a governor of California who ran his campaign on anti-immigration issues. So he showed people crossing the border, saying, nothing different than Donald Trump saying, Mexicans are just criminals and rapists and all of that. So, I could do the same painting today, except I would put Donald Trump in the portrait of the guy instead. The writing is in Afrikaans, which is what people write in South Africa. And a friend of mine from South Africa, who was an activist against apartheid, helped me to translate the words. The words is, I want to wake up now. This painting is called The Governor's Nightmare. This is another version of The Governor's Nightmare. And that's a close-up. So In this case, it's cannibalism. It's some kind of a religious act too, because if you think about it, the idea of eating Jesus in the Holy Host, and the wine as his blood, it's another kind of cannibalistic religious idea, but very spiritual too. So I wanted to play with that interaction, but hopefully with a little sense of humor. Anyway, so that's where my codices basically come from. This book in the collection of the Museum of Modern Art in New York, The Adventures of the Enlightened Cannibal. And these are just the pages of it. And so, I have pages that could be pretty controversial. In fact, I'm going to go through a controversy I had with pages that are not too different than this. These are icons that I mixed. It's not the religious, there is no Jesus here, by the way. This is a collage. And this is the way I express the corruption of spiritual values, if anything. That's something I'm going to talk a little more later. So I'm going to move on from my codices into the reverse modernist. See, because I have so many codices, I could really spend the rest of the evening here. So I decided to do the idea of reverse anthropology, sort of like an idea, as I say, as if the Aztecs had conquered Europe. When the Spaniards conquered Mexico, they built up churches on top of pyramids. And you still could see one of them in the state of Puebla. It's a giant pyramid, and right on top there is a church. So I decided, I ran into a book that was being destroyed by mold in the flea market in Mexico, and some pages were still good, and it had original etchings, original engravings, illustrating biographies of artists. So this is a biography of Rembrandt, a lady with fan, and I'm sorry I didn't have better slides of this, and this artwork is gone a long time ago, I don't have it. But I did a whole series of paintings over these 19th century prints. And this was the beginning of my reverse anthropology series. Just making things like in my codices in a way, but just taking the idea that if the Aztecs took over the libraries of Spain or Europe, well, they will not burn them maybe, but what if they decided to make drawings on top of them or paintings on top of them? And I began to play with that idea. But of course, it's not just an illustration of that concept. It goes beyond that. There's a lot of unconscious elements in the work. So it's not necessarily literary against European art. But in a way, I really love the work behind it. I just want to make clear it's something that I enjoy mixing, imagery that I like, but that together become like a different meaning than the original. Like this one is a drawing I did gave to my wife. It's for her wedding. So it's the artist and his bride. In any case, at the end, this painting is probably what resumes in the best way my idea of reverse anthropology. This is the goddess Coatlicue, the goddess of everything, the Aztec goddess. And when the Spaniards discovered this, they say this is a monster. They buried it, and it was not uncovered until the early 1900s, still in one single piece, a gigantic sculpture. And it's in the Museum of Anthropology in Mexico City, if you ever go there. And what it is a three-dimensional writing system. And Coatlicue was the mother of the main god, Huitzilopochtli, which is the sun, and she was the mother of the moon. The sun and the moon were his children, and she is decapitated. The way you know that she's decapitated is because there is two snakes coming out of her neck. The snakes represented blood, but also represented life. So, and the life is full of, there's a concept of contradiction, like a yin and yang in the Aztec mythology. So she was the goddess of life and death as well. So that's why there is also, besides the snakes that represent life, there is the symbols of death all around, like the skull and the hearts from sacrificed victims. And this is a German girl, she's worshiping her. In my science fiction book, after the Aztecs conquered Germany, I guess. That's a prey in the woods. So I began to do versions of codices in different ways. And I did it with the same idea. This one, I did it because I have to probably show you something here a little bigger. Yeah, good. I was living in France the second time, and I have to write an essay about the destruction of pre-Columbian books. And I went to the Bibliothèque Nationale to look for the Mayan book they have there. The Codex Paris is in the Bibliothèque Nationale. And I brought letters to them, and I told them I wanted to see it. And they told me they could not show me the book. And I said, why? And I said, because a Mexican stole pre-Columbian manuscripts from our library just a couple of years ago. And I say, search me. It was not me. I don't have them. I wish. That guy, actually, the Mexican guy got arrested in Mexico, and what he stole from the Bibliothèque Nationale became part of the Museum of Anthropology in Mexico. So it's public domain now. So, but anyway, so when I told them, I didn't do it, search me, they didn't laugh. I mean, Parisians could be very bureaucratic, I mean, I'm generalizing because I met some nice Parisians too, but places like the Bibliothèque Nationale, if you have to deal with it, be aware. And so I told them, because I read a lot of history about the pre-Columbian books, I told them, these books were smuggled illegally out of Mexico in the, I think it was the early 1800s, were smuggled through from a collection in Mexico into a collection in Europe, and then it was auctioned illegally and ended up somehow in the Bibliothèque Nationale. I thought these books should be returned to Mexico so people like myself could see them. And of course they didn't like that either. So I never ever saw the Mayan book in person. I've seen reproductions of it. But I snapped, that's when I snapped about France, and I decided I had to do something with reverse modernism now, or reverse anthropology. So I began to do these books. This is The Adventures of the Modernist Cannibals, which is a similar title and as the painting upstairs with Asterix, this guy here. So like a French anthropologist, maybe speaking Mayan. And this stereotype that I found in France, I put reverse, what is it? Oh, reverse science here. And a Filipino artist who was staying in Giverny a few years before. I stayed in Giverny, lived like a few years before, and I love Giverny. I have no complaints about Giverny. I have complaints about the Bibliothèque Nationale, but Giverny was fantastic. So I thought Paris was going to be as nice as Giverny. But a friend of mine was, Manuel Ocampos, a Filipino painter, was staying there, and I portrayed him there too. And I went to visit him when he was there. But I got images from the Bibliothèque Nationale without their permission, like this character, and I did this other painting. This is an Aztec artist painting a version of Ellsworth Kelly. These are Mayan sculptures invading some Renaissance building in Europe. Mexican comics here. Adelita, which is a Mexican comic character, so like a guerrilla character. She's having fun with Superman. And this is another book in the Bibliothèque Nationale, so I used it. Their favorite drink in Paris, they are really proud of, is Orangina. So I changed that billboard for Orina. I guess I don't need to translate that. This is a Mexican astronaut shooting killer bees to the French resistance here. And the Collection Groupil, which is, they put that stamp in every page of pre-Columbian manuscripts in the Bibliothèque Nationale. And so that's the story why I began to do this kind of a different border. Before I went to France, I was dealing more with US, Mexican borders, and France changed my perspective. It was more now the whole planet is the same thing. So, so I started with the French, and then when I get back, I began to do my versions after Giverny. In Giverny, we have the keys of the garden, so it was great. You could go there at any time, and I just loved it. I love the garden, and I love Monet. So I began to do my versions of that. I began to hallucinate, Mexican canoes floating in the gardens. In this one, there was the U.S.-Mexican War, where the emperor that was pushed by Napoleon III in Mexico, Maximilian, was shot by Benito Juarez. So I made the painting of the shooting of Maximilian in the middle. And so I'm just going to go through some close-ups of that. And that's the close-up of Maximilian. Then I made this other version of that. And that's when this became more a painting that was turning from reverse anthropology into reverse modernism, because I began to put Mondrian there. Most of the images are not mine, but by other artists. I just put them together, some kind of like a painterly collage. The Cannibale lady on the bottom, it's the only thing I did, I replaced the arm of a self-portrait of Picasso. But that cannibal lady with the baby is originally portrayed by Theodore de Brie, a Belgian artist who did illustrations of cultures of the Americas. And he portrayed, this is how the way he portrayed indigenous people of Brazil. And a lot of his illustrations are based on narratives by other people, to the point that he even illustrated mermaids in Brazil. So it's quite fantastic. The portrait of Monet is based on a painting by Gustave Moreau. Gustave Moreau has a painting of Saint Peter in a very similar fashion in his museum. And Asterix is just running away from it, totally scared from the whole experience. In the back, there's an image from a codex on a Mexican canoe, and it's a decapitated figure with two knives on the neck. And it's very intense when you really understand what's happening there. But altogether, to me, this is like the coalition between the stereotypes, the stereotype of barbarism maybe, and the stereotype of civilization as well. So in a way, I work sort of like a yin and yang in a lot of my works, and I hope this makes this painting a little more sensical when you see it next time. Anyway, so I'm gonna keep moving. I did another version of that one, a little smaller. The times could pass fast or slowly. And I made this into a digital print with painting over. I made only 10 copies of this. I move on with more. This is Anthropology with Noodles. And, I made these cans after Andy Warhol. They have a recipe in the back. Here I'm just going to read for you. Anthropology with noodles and your favorite sandwich. A quick and simple meal that's fun to eat. Add a delicious bowl of America's favorite anthropology with noodle soup with lots of yummy noodles to your favorite sandwich. Eating anthropology is so much fun, you are sure to smile. So I did the whole set of their world. including artists, we are no exception. Artist brains with rice. Cream of dealer, art historian alphabet, fundraisers adobo, museum director's stripe, models meat, anthropology with noodles, collector's broad, curator's liver, and critic's tongue. It's my favorite. Then we did one on the economy, too. And I guess it's readable, so yeah, I don't need to read all the labels. This is again the cannibals from Theodore de Bry. This is how Europeans portray other cultures, and then in the background is a French painting by Edouard Manet, The Lunch on the Grass. And to me, it's a contrast between how Europeans represent themselves and how they represent the barbarians. And this is very much behind my idea of reverse modernism. This is a painting in museum in Paris too, by this is a painting by Gustave Courbet. Thank you. It's a Gustave Courbet painting, and it's called The Origin of the World. So I decided to paint the origin of the world in the Aztec mythology, which is in color. Every color, the blue, the white, the red, and the black, represent different directions of the universe. And it's again another contrasting element. This one is called sublime apparition. And it's all these cyclops running away because they saw a ghost with two eyes. And they are afraid of it. I don't know if you could see the two eyes. Oh yeah, it's just painted over with white. Now, this is the famous, infamous book I did that created a big trouble for me. And it's called The Misadventures of the Romantic Cannibals. And this is a book I did to make a satire of the institution of the Catholic Church for, not dealing with the pedophilia scandal. I read the scandal in 2002, I think, when the Boston Globe published all of this information about dozens of kids that were molested in Boston and then around the world. And since then, I had the idea of doing something about the pedophilia. So I decided to do something which in my mind was with some sense of humor. I wanted also to contrast that with the fact that the church is very militant against same-sex marriage and birth control as well. And to me, it's very hypocritical that they felt morally offended by that and then do nothing about the pedophilia. In the other hand, also the fact that there's no women priests, haven't been a woman being a pope. I think if they ever do that, it'll become the most popular religion. And in any case, I made this just to play on that idea. And so I'm going to go through the pages of it. And this is some of the imagery. I have shown this book in many places. I showed it in San Francisco many times. It was invisible there because for San Francisco, this is normal. That's fine. Yeah, we know that. But I showed it at some point in Colorado, at the Loveland Museum of Art in Colorado. And there was a context of elections in 2010. Somebody from the Tea Party decided that they didn't like this work. And they got almost a heart attack with this page. And the person from the Tea Party ended up in Fox News talking about this work. And Fox News never contacted me to explain myself. They never asked me, why did you do this? I didn't have a chance to tell them what I told you. It was about the pedophilia. And also, this is not Jesus. Again, this is a collage. And this is my way to represent the corruption of a beautiful idea, because for me, the original Christianism is really beautiful, and it's an ideal for for justice among people, and the idea of loving your enemy, the idea of leaving your wealth behind, something that hardly anybody does today, I wish. But so it's not about Jesus. This is about the church and the institutions that corrupt beautiful ideals. And I just used my freedom of speech to do this work. So there was an instant protest, and of course after the Fox News portrayed my work as a Stanford professor portrays Jesus as having oral sex. And if you see it, there is no nudity here. There is no sex going on. I mean, it's very provocative, but they're not even touching each other. So, but again, instantly I got tons of hate mail. The protest got really out of hand. A lot of people, began to protest. There was news everywhere. Thankfully, some favorable ones, like in Art in America. But after the Fox News, some person, a truck driver, this woman from Montana, drove her 18-wheeler all the way to Colorado to get offended with my work. So she got a crowbar, destroyed the frame, and destroyed the book. She got tackled by another visitor to the gallery, got arrested, but she became an instant heroine for the Tea Party, who paid all her, her fees and everything to let her free. But then a pastor wrote to me just a little before this incident, and he told me, my congregation wants me to join the picket line, and I don't know what to tell them. What is it? What's behind your artwork? And I explained to him, well, it's about the pedophilia, the hypocrisy with the homophobia and the birth control that the Catholic Church has, but it's not Jesus. I say it's just my way of putting like visual sentences together. And he wrote me back and said, oh, thank you for your thoughtful explanation. If you ever come to Loveland, it will be an honor to meet you. And I felt, wow. I wrote immediately. I told him, I wish most Christians were like you. And we became instant friends. Some people from his congregation walked away, and he got threats. They put his house online. People were inviting people to go and vandalize his house. So his family got in danger. I got threats. I have to talk to the Stanford police. It was, really bad. But a month later, they forgot about us because the same organization that boycotted our show boycotted an exhibition in Washington, D.C. at the Smithsonian. The exhibition was called Hide and Seek. And it was an exhibition of art by gay and lesbian artists. And there was a videotape by artist David von Aerobics, who died from AIDS in the, I think, late 80s, early 90s. And had a crucifix with ants crawling on the crucifix. And that was what offended a lot of people. And the same organization, the so-called National Catholic League, boycotted the exhibition at the Smithsonian, and they took it down immediately. The Loveland Museum, the curator, she was brave. She never took the art down. She kept it, and even after the destruction of this work. But thankfully for Washington, they forgot about us. So suddenly, all the hate mail stopped. And then I got love mail. Suddenly I got people from the congregation, from this pastor who agree with my work, began to send me really nice, beautiful letters. And the pastor and I remained friends. So after the whole thing went down, the pastor asked me, hey, will you do a painting of Jesus for my church? And I thought, wow, well, I had to be honest to him. I told him, I'm not religious myself, but if your congregation accepts the painting from me, sure, I will do it for free. And so he went back to his congregation, read our email, And the congregation accepted with a standing ovation. They really liked the idea. And I still want to not maybe, but you know, nobody knows how Jesus looked like. How would I know how Jesus looked like? And I sent him pictures of Jesus from different cultures. All of this is Jesus. The Korean one, the Russian, the Haitian, Native American, Hungarian, Mexican, Filipino, female, Croatian, Swedish, African American, Chinese, Mexican Indian, Japanese, West African, and the European American, they're rather alike. So I told him, you know, the first representations of Jesus were like 200 years after his death, and they were little drawings of a shepherd with sheep in a cave. That's you know, the earlier images. The rest is construction. So if you don't mind, I'll do my own version. Say, yep, go for it. So I did. So I looked for other. This is a Persian Jesus. But anyway, so this is my version of it. So I look into paintings from the Netherlands and Mexican Baroque paintings, and I blend them. And then I put the word love on the banner because I wanted to remind people that Jesus was about love, not about hate. But I was not sure they will like it. But then he wrote me back and said, we love the banner, it's great because there's a quote from the Bible that says that Jesus run the banner of love over humanity. And I thought, wow, that's amazing. There is God, it was guiding my hand. But anyway, so it ended up really nice until after this, I sent the work, they pay for the shipping. The painting is big, it's 80 inches high by 60 inches wide. And when I sent it, I thought that was the end of the story, but then they invited me to go for a reception. And then I got really scared. I thought, in Colorado, they killed people for less than what we did. You know, I was just telling some people, you know, like you go to see a Batman movie and you could be in the middle of a massacre there, you know, like what happened in the middle of a Batman movie not too long ago. So I felt they're gonna shoot the pastor, they're gonna shoot me, it's really scary. But I ended up going by myself. I didn't want to bring my wife or the publisher of the print. I didn't want to risk anybody. And I decided to take responsibility for my art, for my paintings. And it was the most beautiful experience I had. Nobody tried to convert me into Christianity. We didn't talk about God or Jesus, nothing. I just met the families of the pastors and their children, and they were super nice to me. They put bodyguards with me. I felt like a rock star there. Their congregation had like, like 1,000 people in the big auditorium, and I thanked them for their openness. And, it was really nice. This congregation was working with undocumented immigrants later. And they of course are against the pedophilia as well. They didn't go as far as same-sex marriage, but eventually maybe they will. I don't know. But it was a beautiful dialogue. It really was an amazing. I was never expecting that from my artwork. I got out of my art bubble, and the pastor got out of his religious bubble, and we meet in the middle. It was quite a great experience. So anyway, I'm almost done with my talk. So the idea of interacting with modernist art, it's based on, it's slightly different than reverse anthropology. This is the idea of, based on the modernist artists, some of them were appropriating art from former colonies, from art from former colonies, like Picasso appropriating African masks to develop some of his Cubist style, or Henry Moore appropriating Aztec sculpture to develop his seated figures, and so on. So I decided, what will happen if the reverse took place? Now, these are not like the Aztecs conquering Europe. This is more like the primitive artists appropriating European art, and from a primitive, quote-unquote primitive perspective. So I did an exhibition, it was called The Mindful Savage Guide to Reverse Modernism, early this year in San Francisco. This is a big shot of my show, and you are going to see some of the paintings in detail. This is just Anyway, this is as I mentioned to some friends here, I practice meditation, so I'm moving away from all the violent paintings and drawing. I just don't want to argue with people, or I'm trying to find more like a little peaceful way to represent something. Now here I use stereotypes of different cultures with my own self, just to show that behind every stereotype there is a human being, flesh and bones. So it's not egocentrism, but rather just to show there is just a person there. I got these images from a 1959 book from Cuba that had a lot of very stereotypical renderings of different cultures from around the world, including Mexicans, of course. So I have done different versions of the same, this work on metal of the same imagery. This is another painting, one of a kind, on a vintage paper that I found in the dumpsters, and then I de-acidified the paper and painted over this, again with different cultural icons. And this is my latest version of that. That's in the print fair in New York with Bud Shark in Colorado, Aliens Sans Frontiers. Basically the same idea with stereotypes from different places. And, you know, maybe some of the last pictures I'm gonna show you are these. This is called the daguerrotypical cannibals in Spanish, los caníbales daguerrotípicos, with stereotypes of people that I found in France here. This was Picasso and his wife and a friend, so I put African masks on them. Picasso again here. This is a house by Frank Lloyd Wright based on Mayan architecture, so I put Mexican, very kitschy looking monuments on top of Frank Lloyd Wright's house. This is Joseph Boyce as a Native American. And this is the architect himself, Frank Lloyd Wright, designing one of the Mexican monuments. He never did that, so this is only happening in my book. Picasso as an African sculpture on top of an Aztec mask. The designs by Yves Saint Laurent. I actually did a version of this print by itself. This is a sculpture by Henry Moore with an Aztec head. This is the head that used to be here. So we traded. The Surrealists were people who admired the primitive. The Surrealists say the primitive are like the childhood of humanity. So I put André Breton here with a couple of revolutionary dwarfs here that from the Mexican Revolution that I found in some photographs. And this is it's a French poet, Benjamin Perret, I think. No, I'll get his name later. Anyway, so this is the whole book. A photograph by Edward Curtis, who did a lot of Native American pictures. I did another version of him there. The Surrealist filmmaker Luis Buñuel, and this is Rose C'est la Vie by Marcel Duchamp. It's Marcel Duchamp as a giant Mexican revolutionary. And these are the versions of the Edward Curtis. Originally, his photographs were etchings, so we did an etching. This is a photo engraving with an advertising for the iPad in the background. And on the bottom, this is another photograph after Cartier-Bresson, this little guy jumping on the water. And this is the same version. Jacques Cocteau is the poet and person's body that I put here with a Mayan head. And then a Mexican wrestler in the back, somebody from Papua New Guinea, and the African mask in the other white. I like Mondrian a lot because he didn't make money with his paintings. The dresses here that were designed by Yves Saint Laurent were sold around $3,000. This is in the 1960s. And that was as much as one painting that Mondrian ever sold in his lifetime. So I don't know if his foundation ever got money from that, but I began to do my own versions of that. This is the opposite of meditation. Meditation is you have to be here and now. Pay attention to the present. This one is the opposite. It's somewhere yesterday. And I end up putting my kitties in my paintings. This is Lulu and Santos. Lulu is my boss. She is my manager, answers my emails. And I think I'm gonna end up with her. I think I might show you some works, but this is only a few seconds, less than a minute. She's quick. She scored that one. That's almost the end. She has to check her score and goes back to position. To keep playing. Anyway, she won. Anyways, when one of my cats died, I put him in a painting after James Ensor, Diego, and this is called Devils Torture Me. And in the background, I put Bill O'Reilly from Fox News, Lou Dobbs, also very conservative writer in the middle, Rush Limbaugh, and Ann Coulter in the far right. And these people are changing the head of an indigenous person for a European head. So, but again, I love James Ensor, so I wanted to do my own version of that, just making my own statement. And this was my latest paintings after Giverny, and it's about the art market and the house, the auction houses. But anyway, so I think I pretty much explained all of this work, the versions of my codices here, and this is very much the end of my lecture. You probably recognize everybody here, from Marilyn Monroe to Obama and Van Gogh. These are like about borders and walls. This is a wall where, you know, people from non-European backgrounds are in red in the background, and all the European backgrounds are like on the front. So it's the day and night. And this is how I finish my paintings. The square is by Ellsworth Kelly, with Joseph Beuys on the bottom here. Cubans crossing the ocean that I end up putting in my painting. And I don't want to overwhelm you with work, so I pretty much finish my work here. This is a tribute to the adventurous, undocumented immigrants that come from all the way from Cuba, making all those works. Thank you very much for taking so many images of my work. And do we still have time for questions? Maybe if you have, I'll be glad to answer a couple of questions if you have any. Yes?
So was the Loveland piece repaired, or did it stay broken for the rest of the exhibition?
It stayed broken, and it's still broken. But it was an edition of about 24 books, not 30 books. So there's still many copies remaining, thankfully. So it's a multiple. That's the beauty of printmaking. Yeah. I hope I didn't over-explain myself. Yeah, and there's one back there, yes.
The most of all?
Well, I guess if it's one thing, would be the idea of making things that look alike something else. And that came from visiting my father's office when I saw all the forgeries that were happening there. And he worked in the arrest of a French forger. San Pietro was an Italian nickname. And my father visited him in prison, and he asked him why he did it. Because the French artists went to the best art schools in France, came from wealthy families, and my dad wanted to understand why he did it. And the French artists or con artists say, well, I did it for the thrills. And that story stayed in my mind, and I decided, well, I want to do things that for the thrills, because I feel good that something looks like something else, but I don't want to be in jail. So you have the fair use of copyrighted material. Although most of the work I use are no longer copyrighted, especially any art that is beyond 50 years old, like Monet's or Picasso's, Goya's, all of that, you could use it. But you still don't want to sign their names because that would be a forgery. So even if you make a copy, you have to sign your own name. But the other fair use of copyrighted material, besides time, is that you change the meaning of the work. So it becomes a different idea. So when you do that in a collage, like in my case, Mickey Mouse is not Mickey Mouse anymore. It's more like a symbol of cultural colonialism, and that's it. And I have been even invited by the Disney Museum to show works of mine with Disney imagery. And I remember the first time they called me, I thought it was the lawyers. But no, they don't have any problem with that. As long as you're not doing forgeries and you're not doing con art, that you're not profiting from that, you are okay if you are using it as in a critical statement or changing the meaning of the original work. So that's basically what influenced a lot of my series. I keep evolving into reverse anthropology or reverse modernism, but it still has a line of connection with that very idea. So I guess that's the answer. And okay, just one last question, just quick, yeah.
How that affects your work?
Yeah, my appropriations are in a way, how can I put it, more culturally based than just regular appropriation. A lot of contemporary artists appropriate for different reasons. What I was maybe critiquing was a little bit the history of Western art, because a lot of these artists who I admire, I have to say, like Picasso or Henry Moore or Frank Lloyd Wright or the Surrealists, nevertheless, they came from a position of power, and they appropriated cultural imagery, artifacts from former colonies that were not in a position of power. So my appropriations have a connotation of power, the imbalance of power among people. And the only thing I want with my appropriation is to put a mirror in front of us, to say that we are all the same species. We are all victims and victimizers of ourselves. And that's something that I don't understand why. Why cannot be the best friends that we could be instead of our worst enemies, which we happen to be more often than not. But I believe that we could be our best friends too as a species eventually. And it's a matter of evolving in history. Hopefully we will get out of the prehistory of humankind into a real humanistic experience. We might have to go through something really bad to get better, but I do my work with hope, not with cynicism, but it's the only thing that keeps me going. And my appropriations in that sense might be very different than just appropriating for a frivolous statement or just because something looks good next to each other. But I hope I answered your question. And I think we run out of time. I'm very sorry, but I think I overextended my lecture too. But thank you for coming.